Before we dive into this breathtaking story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more action-packed stories like this to life. It was supposed to be just another routine flight from Los Angeles. The passengers were a mix of journalists, government officials, and ordinary travelers heading to Washington. But hidden among them was a carefully planted team of terrorists, led by a name whispered with fear across intelligence agencies, Carlos Gruber. Within minutes of takeoff, the nightmare unfolded. Armed men stormed the cockpit, silenced the pilots, and announced to the stunned passengers that the aircraft was now under their control. Panic spread like wildfire. Screams filled the cabin. And above the clouds, a new crisis was born. As the passengers trembled in fear, the terrorists revealed their true weapon. Not just the rifles in their hands, but something far more terrifying. Bromex 365. This wasn't just another chemical compound. Intelligence reports described it as the most destructive element ever created. Hidden inside small gel packs, Bromex had the potential to erase all life within a 200-mile radius if released. Los Angeles, a city of millions, was now hanging by a thread. The hijackers weren't bluffing. They declared that the entire cargo hold of the plane had been rigged with Bromex alongside C4 explosives. If their demands weren't met, they would detonate the device, unleashing a catastrophe the world had never seen before. The passengers were horrified, the government was shocked, and the clock had already started ticking. Among the terrified passengers sat a man whose presence raised the stakes to unimaginable heights, the Vice President of the United States, Charles Baker. Suddenly, this was no longer just a hijacking. It was a direct assault on the American government. The terrorists dragged him to the front of the cabin, pressing a gun to his head for the cameras. His calm but tense expression sent a chilling message. This was not an empty threat. For the hijackers, Baker was a bargaining chip of priceless value. For the US government, he was a living symbol of national security, and his capture placed the entire nation in jeopardy. The passengers realized that if the vice president could be executed at any moment, then no one on board was safe. Every word, every movement became a matter of survival. In the chaos, one figure stood out, a replacement cameraman who had joined the crew at the very last minute. The original operator had been suddenly pulled away due to a so-called family emergency. At first, his presence seemed harmless, even fortunate, as the press needed someone to record the vice president's statements. But as the situation unfolded, suspicion grew. His movements were too precise, his demeanor too controlled. Whispers among the passengers began. Was he really part of the media team? Or was he one of them? The truth was darker than anyone imagined. The cameraman was indeed an inside man, strategically placed to ensure the terrorists had eyes and ears everywhere. This revelation sent chills down the spine of everyone on board, because if the terrorists had planned this infiltration, how much deeper did their plan go? 5. First transmission from the hijackers. Demands that shocked the world moments. After seizing the plane, Carlos Gruber ordered the cameras to roll. His calm, commanding voice echoed through the cabin as he forced the vice president to sit in frame, living proof that the hijacking was real. The broadcast was relayed directly to the FBI and major news outlets. Gruber introduced himself not as a fanatic, but as a strategic operator with a plan. He demanded two things: the immediate release of Paul Ezrat, a scientist convicted of crimes against humanity for his work in chemical weapons, a transfer of $100 million into an offshore account within just 4.5 hours. Failure to comply, he warned, would result in the detonation of Bromex 365 over Los Angeles. The city would be turned into a wasteland, and the blood would be on the hands of the US government. The ultimatum shocked the world. Negotiators scrambled, military advisors panicked, and families watching at home held their breath. For the first time, the possibility of mass destruction by airborne terrorism was real, and the entire planet was watching. Far below the clouds, in the fortified walls of the FBI's West Division, chaos erupted. Monitors flashed red warnings, phones rang off the hook, and the room filled with the heavy silence of disbelief as agents confirmed the hijackers' demands. The briefing was brutal. Bromex 365 wasn't just a weapon, it was a nightmare designed in laboratories, powerful enough to wipe out an entire city in seconds. The FBI director spelled it out plainly. If this detonates at low altitude, Los Angeles will vanish. Millions of lives, gone. Specialists rushed to calculate timelines. The plane had limited fuel, negotiations would stall, and the terrorists had the upper hand. Even more disturbing was the suspicion that someone inside the Secret Service had leaked classified details, allowing Gruber to execute his plan with terrifying precision. The conclusion was undeniable. This wasn't a random hijacking. It was a coordinated act of war, and the United States was now on a countdown to disaster. When the word reached Washington, one name surfaced immediately: Rick Harding. Harding wasn't just another operative. He was a former Secret Service agent, an expert in counter-terrorism, and, most importantly, the man who knew more about Bromex 365 than anyone alive. Years earlier, he had worked on containment strategies after stolen batches of the chemical surfaced in the black market. He understood its danger better than anyone, but this mission wasn't just professional for him. Hidden from most of the agency was a chilling truth. Harding's wife was among the hostages. She had been assigned as part of the media team covering the vice president's diplomatic tour. For Rick, this wasn't only about saving a city, it was about saving the person he loved most. Despite objections from commanding officers, Harding insisted on being part of the strike team. Some called it reckless, others called it desperate. But in Harding's eyes, it was simple. You need someone who knows Bromex inside and out. You need someone who has something to lose. That someone is me. The reluctant hero had entered the fight, and with him, the mission shifted from a military operation to a deeply personal battle for survival. The clock was ticking, and the FBI couldn't afford mistakes. Directly storming the aircraft was impossible. Any sudden strike could trigger Gruber to detonate the Bromex. The only option was surgical: infiltrate the plane mid-flight. Inside a dimly lit hangar, engineers unveiled a modified stealth S-171 transport jet, equipped with docking clamps and a pressurized transfer system. The plan was daring, bordering on insane. The commandos would fly beneath the hijacked plane, attach a transfer tube, and slip a small strike team into the cargo hold without detection. Harding studied the blueprints, his eyes locked on the timing sequences. One miscalculation, one loose bolt, one delay, and the mission would collapse in fire and death. "We'll have maybe 2 hours inside that plane," one officer explained. 2 hours to disarm the bomb, neutralize the terrorists, and save the vice president. After that, there won't be anything left to save. The tension was palpable. Every man knew the odds. Some wouldn't make it back. But as Harding strapped on his gear, his mind was fixed on only one thought: if I don't step onto that plane, I may never see my wife again. The engines roared to life. The mission to infiltrate the skies had begun. The stealth jets soared beneath the hijacked airliner, turbulence shaking the men inside like ragdolls. At 28,000 feet, the world outside was nothing but darkness and the deafening roar of engines. Time slowed as the docking clamps locked into place. One by one, the strike team prepared to transfer. The hatch opened, the freezing air rushed in, and the narrow tunnel connected the two aircraft. This was it, the point of no return. But almost instantly, disaster struck. A hydraulic failure rattled the system, alarms blared, and the tube began to buckle under pressure. The commander shouted to abort, but 3 men had already crossed: Rick Harding, Captain Ratner, and Lieutenant Wells. The rest were forced to retreat as the connection collapsed. Now, against all odds, only 3 soldiers carried the fate of an entire city on their shoulders. No backup, no reinforcements, just courage, training, and desperation. Inside the cargo bay, the men crouched in silence, listening to the muffled voices of terrorists just meters away. Harding whispered, "We're in, and we're on our own." Once inside, the 3 agents faced a suffocating silence. Every corner of the cargo hold was wired with explosives, every shadow a potential death trap. The air was heavy with fuel, sweat, and fear. One wrong sound, one careless move, and the terrorists would know they weren't alone. Harding led the way, signaling with hand gestures. Ratner and Wells followed, rifles raised, their hearts pounding as if they could hear each other's pulse over the roar of the engines. Above them, muffled cries of hostages echoed through the floor panels. They could hear the vice president being forced to record another message, this time with Gruber standing behind him like a phantom of death. Every word was laced with menace. Release Ezrat, or we unleash hell. For the agents, the challenge wasn't just to stay hidden. It was to plan their next moves without margin for error. Harding whispered, "Our priority is the bomb. If that thing goes off, none of us get out alive." And so began the silent struggle. 3 men against time, surrounded by enemies, with the weight of millions of lives pressing down on their shoulders. 11. The growing tension between hostages and terrorists. In the main cabin, the atmosphere was unbearable. Every hostage sat frozen, eyes wide, breaths shallow, as armed terrorists prowled the aisles like wolves guarding prey. The slightest movement drew the cold steel of a rifle barrel pressing against someone's head. Whispers spread between passengers, plans of resistance, prayers, desperate bargains. But fear smothered every flicker of hope. The vice president tried to keep them calm, speaking softly, assuring them help was coming. Yet even his words felt fragile in the face of Gruber's ruthless control. To prove his seriousness, Gruber made a chilling display. He executed a passenger at random, not out of necessity, but to send a message. No one was untouchable. Screams erupted, tears flowed, and silence returned like a shroud. Meanwhile, Harding and his team listened from below, fists clenched, powerless to intervene just yet. Every gunshot, every cry from above, was a dagger in their chests. Harding's thoughts burned with one truth. If my wife is among those terrified voices, I will not fail her. The tension had reached a breaking point. One wrong decision from either side, and the fragile balance inside the aircraft would collapse into chaos. Creeping deeper into the belly of the aircraft, Harding's flashlight beam caught something that froze the blood in his veins. A steel case bristling with wires, sensors, and blinking lights. This wasn't just any explosive device. It was the Bromex bomb. Stacked neatly in gel packs, the chemical compound pulsed like a living monster, waiting to be unleashed. Attached to it were blocks of C4, all wired to a remote trigger. The terrorists had been meticulous. Motion sensors, tripwires, and a direct feed from the plane's electrical system. Any wrong move, any attempt to cut the wrong wire, would send the aircraft and Los Angeles below into oblivion. Wells, the team's demolition expert, leaned in, his face pale. "This is worse than I imagined," he whispered. The countdown timer blinked relentlessly. 1 hour, 47 minutes until detonation. Harding placed a hand on the case, steadying himself. "If this goes off, it's over. Disarming it isn't an option, and it's a necessity." Above them, passengers screamed again as another threat was issued. Time was running out, and now the agents faced 2 wars, one against the terrorists and one against the bomb itself. The glowing digits on the bomb's timer were more than just numbers. They were a death sentence, slowly ticking away. 1 hour and 47 minutes. Every second brought the plane and millions of lives below closer to annihilation. Wells examined the device with trembling hands. The Bromex gel packs pulsed with a strange shimmer, as if mocking the fragility of human life. He whispered to Harding, "This isn't just explosives, it's engineered terror. If the C4 doesn't kill us, the chemical cloud will." Harding's jaw tightened. He knew there was no room for mistakes. One misplaced tool, one misjudged wire, and the skies would rain fire and poison. Ratner kept watch, but his voice betrayed his fear. "We're 3 men in a flying coffin. How do you expect us to pull this off?" Above, the hijackers forced the vice president into another broadcast, declaring the countdown had begun and that the US government was running out of time to comply. The world watched in horror. For the hostages, hope was slipping away. For Harding, the mission was now crystal clear. Disarm the bomb, defeat Gruber, and save his wife, or die trying. Carlos Gruber was no ordinary terrorist. He understood that fear was the strongest weapon of all. To prove his absolute control, he staged a brutal demonstration. Dragging a trembling hostage to the front of the cabin, he spoke with chilling calm. "This is not a negotiation. This is a lesson. Every delay, every hesitation will cost a life." Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. The deafening gunshot silenced the cabin, leaving only the sobs of survivors. The vice president clenched his fists, his face pale but defiant. Yet even he realized the danger of provoking Gruber further. Every passenger now knew the stakes. One wrong move, 1 minute wasted, and another innocent life would be lost. From the cargo bay, Harding and his team listened, their rage boiling. Wells whispered, "We can't just sit here while he slaughters them." Harding's reply was steady, but his voice carried fire. "Our time will come. When we strike, it has to be decisive." Gruber's message reached not only those on board, but the entire world watching through live broadcasts. He wanted to be remembered not as a fanatic, but as the man who forced a superpower to kneel. And unless someone stopped him, he would succeed. Terror breeds silence, but silence cannot last forever. Among the hostages, whispers of defiance began to spark. A few brave passengers, driven by sheer desperation, plotted to overpower the guards when the moment was right. One man feigned illness, clutching his stomach and collapsing in the aisle. As a terrorist leaned in to check, another hostage sprang forward, trying to wrestle away the rifle. Chaos exploded, screams, gunshots, and bodies colliding. For a heartbeat, it seemed like freedom might be within reach. But Gruber was merciless. He ordered his men to fire a warning shot into the ceiling, and then, without hesitation, he struck down one of the would-be rebels in front of everyone. Blood stained the floor. Hope was crushed beneath the heel of cruelty. The message was clear: resistance would be met with death. Yet deep inside, Harding knew these desperate acts mattered. They revealed cracks in the terrorists' control, cracks he and his team could exploit when the time came. Still, every failed attempt meant fewer lives left to save. The passengers were running out of strength, and the agents were running out of time. As the minutes slipped away, the agents discovered that the battlefield wasn't divided simply between good and evil. In the shadows of the cargo hold, Harding's team uncovered a shocking truth. One of the security officials assigned to the vice president's detail had betrayed them. The man, forced into collaboration after terrorists threatened his family, had been secretly feeding information to Gruber. His insider knowledge explained the terrifying precision of the hijacking, the swapped cameraman, the detailed flight plan, even the exact location of the vice president inside the cabin. Ratner's instinct was to eliminate him immediately. "A traitor doesn't deserve mercy," he hissed, finger on the trigger. But Harding stopped him. "If he breaks, we lose control. If we use him, we may still have a chance." The debate wasn't just tactical, it was moral. Could they trust a man who had sold them out, even under duress? Could a traitor be redeemed if the cost of his failure meant the death of millions? Harding made the call. "We use him to get closer to Gruber. If he falters again, then we finish this our way." It was a decision that blurred the line between justice and necessity, and one that would haunt them long after the mission ended. While fear consumed the passengers in the skies, an equally brutal battle raged on the ground, not with weapons, but with decisions. In the White House Situation Room, generals, advisors, and the president himself clashed over the next move. One side argued for negotiation. "Give the Mesrat, wire the money, once we can't risk millions of lives." The other side demanded action. "If we cave in, America bows to terror. Next time it won't be one plane, it'll be 10. Every voice was right. Every voice was wrong. The president's face was stone, his words heavy. "Our first objective is neutralizing Bromex. But if that fails, we shoot the plane down before it reaches Los Angeles." The room fell silent. It was the unthinkable, sacrificing the vice president and hundreds of innocents to prevent an apocalypse on the ground. Meanwhile, Harding and his two teammates oblivious to the grim orders, fought on with only one goal: to save everyone. Little did they know that the government might soon decide to end it all with a single missile strike. The fate of the mission now hung between two ticking clocks: Gruber's countdown and the president's. The moment Harding had been waiting for arrived. Crawling through the narrow service corridors of the aircraft, he and Ratner finally reached the cabin entrance. Gruber stood before the passengers like a king on his throne, gun in hand, the vice president forced at his side. Harding burst in, rifle raised. Bullets erupted, shattering windows and slicing through seats. Passengers ducked and screamed as the firefight raged in the confined space. Ratner provided cover while Harding pushed forward, every shot bringing him closer to the man who had orchestrated the nightmare. Face to face at last, Harding locked eyes with Gruber. The terrorist smirked, unshaken. "Do you really think one man can stop history?" he taunted. Harding's reply was cold, steady. "One man is all it takes." They clashed violently, fists slamming, weapons flying across the floor. Every strike was personal. Harding fighting for his wife, Gruber fighting for his twisted legacy. In the chaos, the remote detonator slid across the cabin floor, both men lunging for it at the same time. This wasn't just combat. It was the battle for the fate of millions, and only one of them could walk away alive. While Harding wrestled with Gruber in the cabin, Lieutenant Wells was locked in a battle of his own. Against the bomb in the cargo hold, sweat poured down his face as the timer ticked mercilessly, Cesaro 12:37. The device was unlike anything he had ever seen. Wires crisscrossed into a labyrinth of traps, each leading to the volatile gel packs of Bromex 365. One wrong snip would vaporize the entire aircraft and everyone below. His hands trembled, but his voice remained calm as he radioed Harding, "I need more time, keep them distracted." Above, Harding's fists slammed against Gruber, each second bought with blood and desperation. The detonator slid dangerously close to one of the terrorists, forcing Ratner to dive across the aisle in a desperate tackle. Back below, Wells reached the final stage, isolating the bomb's power source. He whispered a prayer, cut the wire, and for a moment, nothing. Then the timer froze at 00:07:01. The cabin erupted in relief, but Harding knew the fight wasn't over. Gruber still drew breath, and until he was finished, the nightmare wasn't truly over. The frozen timer gave the passengers a flicker of hope, but the battle wasn't done. Gruber, bloodied but unbroken, lunged one final time, seizing the detonator from the floor. His finger hovered over the trigger, his voice a snarl. "If I die, we all die with me." Harding, battered and bruised, locked eyes with him. Time seemed to stop. With a surge of strength, he launched forward, tackling Gruber into the bulkhead. The detonator slipped from his hand and shattered on impact. The terrorist's reign ended with a single decisive blow, and the cabin fell silent at last. Cheers and sobs erupted among the hostages. The vice president stood, shaken but alive. Harding embraced his wife, whispering, "It's over. You're safe." Meanwhile, the military jet circling above confirmed the message. Target secure, bomb neutralized, hostages alive. The order to destroy the plane was cancelled with seconds to spare. When the crippled aircraft finally touched down, the world watched in awe as survivors stepped onto the runway, greeted by blinding lights and thunderous applause. Heroes emerged from the smoke, proof that courage could defy terror. But as Harding walked away from the wreckage, he knew this victory carried scars that would never heal. For him, for the passengers, and for the nation, the memory of Flight 232 would forever be a reminder of how close they came to the edge of apocalypse.